Welcome, everybody. So, this is Jason, and I'm doing part two of the workshop that I started last week. It's basically an introduction to SimPE. So, last week we covered some of the basic points like how it's put together, uh, what the different parts are, where to get SimPE, and how to set it up. And today we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into some of the resources. So, for those of you who were here last week, Rachel, what is SimPE? Can you tell us?
Um, it's a package file editor that opens up package files and their components so you can see what's in it.
Yeah, yeah, okay, that's fair. Specifically for Sims 2, because there are other tools
hmm
that the package. I guess you could explain it most as well. Let's not get too far ahead because that was the next question. Uh, Wednesday, can you tell us what a package file is?
If I could figure out how to unmute myself. It's just pretty much how all of the files are labeled for The Sims 2, basically. Well, not all of them, but yeah, I'm going to shut up.
Kind of.
I would
Well,
say it's a
it's
container.
I wasn't prepared to answer questions.
yes. No,
Okay.
that's fine. It's a that's a good description. It's a container. It's a delivery system essentially for the resources inside it. And but it's not exclusive to The Sims 2. It was introduced in Sims 2, but Sims 3 and Sims 4 also have packages,
Right.
but SimPE only works for Sims 2.
Yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
so next question, and anyone jump in. What is a resource?
Isn't it like a component of the package which tells how something is
It's it
read or set up?
yeah, it is a component, but it has a specific function. For example, a GMDC is not a crest. It's I mean they're components with specific purposes. So yeah, okay. And what are the three primary parts of SimPE? As you open it, what are the three main things that you see?
I could answer, but then I feel like I'm answering everything.
Anyone?
Arizer said resources and plugins.
No.
Oh, is that there's like a resource tree,
There
isn't
is a
there?
resource tree. That is one of the main components.
Maybe that's what resource he meant by they meant by resources. Resource tree. Yes, that's what they meant. And then isn't there a plugin or what is that window at the bottom that has plugin view tab?
Yeah,
Plugin
that's what I
view
was thinking
is
of too.
plugin view. Well, it's I mean that's what we normally see, but it's actually a subset of that part. So
Yeah.
there is the resource tree on the upper left that filters resources by types. There's the resource list on the upper right that filters resources like the specific resource, and then there's the action pane, and the action pane has a lot of functions like plugin view, object workshop, the search function. It does a lot of different things. Okay, so glad everyone got something out of the last workshop. That's good that we're retaining that. Moving on. So this week specifically, we are looking at uh, object resources. So object resources are kind of unique. Let's go up to, and if you're following along at home in the resource thread, I left a couple of different files. We're looking at 9 a.m. Square Table Master. Uh, so let's open that, and then we look for the CTSS in the resource tree, and we click it again in the resource list. Okay, so we have this plugin. It looks a lot like the regular string str text resource, but it's a little bit different. So what did I say here? The CTSS is a catalog description. It's a specialized text resource with two parts: the name of the object and the object's description. It's only available for buy and most build mode objects. I put that little caveat because we will go into that with the other file that's in the resource thread. Okay? More about the CTSS. The CTSS's plugin is fairly straightforward. So if we look at the plugin view here, we've got two lines. The first line, this is the title. This is the thing that appears in bold in the catalog as you click on the object. The first line allows you to edit the title, and the second allows you to enter a description. The CTSS is not part of the scene graph, but it is an important resource for new object creators to learn. What I mean by that, when you clone a new object, you're obviously not going to leave the Maxis description. You're going to write your own thing here and here. To make it unique, you would need to know how to change this. So you just write whatever your title is, whatever your description is, commit, and then save your changes.
And I was gonna note, if you're creating, it would be good to put in the description, like, if your name, so people know who made it. If it has any like dependencies, like if it's a repo or anything, like what the master mesh would be and where that would be from. Just helpful information in the description.
That is a fantastic point. And as an example of that, so if you look at the table's description, it says 9 Archers Mead Hall Reimagined. This was part of a series I did. It's been out like a year now, I think. It says square table for, well, that window isn't very helpful. Square table for small groups of revelers. This is the master file. Do not delete. That is helpful to put in your catalog description if you have a set of objects that are slave to it. Then, originally created by, and I gave credit to Llama because she was the original creator, and fixes and extra items by me, and that is the site of my blog. So yes, that's a very good point, Rachel. You can use the CTSS to build out the description of your object so that it's not just a generic thing. You know, who created it? Where can I download this? Where can I find more things like it? Okay, anything further on the CTSS?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay,
Thanks.
moving on. The OBJD. This is a cool resource. And I don't know, for some reason it has two here. It's not a multi-tile object, it's just a one table. So, but for the purpose of this workshop, that's fine. So, the OBJD, object data, does several things. It holds the object's GUID, that is globally unique identifier. It determines the price, category, and room placement an object is sorted into, and it determines the position of the green footprint is placed in multi-tile objects. It super doesn't matter in single tile objects. And it determines which slot resources have access to each tile. Okay, so let's break that down a little bit. Sorry. The OBJD's plugin can best be described as an organized list. The left section contains the GUID and communicates with other GUIDs in case of diagonal windows and doors. Okay, so what we mean here, this is the GUID. This is what makes this object unique. There are no other GUIDs for this object. If you just clone from a regular Maxis table and don't update this, the table that you cloned will replace that object in the catalog. So it's very important to generate a new one. This is cool because it allows you to, if you enter a new GUID and you want to make this thing recolorable, then you would need to click here and then update, and it would overwrite this GUID to the mmap because that is based on the GUID. These two things here, most budding creators probably aren't going to mess with them. But if you've ever wondered what the purpose of these were, the diagonal GUID and the grid align GUID, if you have a diagonal window and you want that to be linked to a straight window, you would enter in the straight windows master tile, you would enter the diagonal GUID here. And then in the diagonal windows master tile, you would enter the straight tiles master GUID here in grid align GUID. So, fun fact. Then, the primary tab, catalog sort, that's this one here. It allows you to categorize the room and function sort of your object. So say we don't want this in the kitchen anymore. We want this in the kids' room. Okay, we can uncheck these. We can check that. And then we don't want it to appear in surfaces for some odd reason. So we can select, for example, electronics, and then in the drop down here, we can just recategorize this. This is helpful if you're creating, for example, a deco object, but you don't want it to appear in deco. Say it's an engine block, and you want that engine block to appear with your cars and not your deco objects. Okay? So now, the second tab, raw data, is an organized, collapsible list of sections. So let's have a look at some of those sections. This one, not terribly important. So if you go to catalog price, this price, this is, if you have it set to decimal, this is important, switch it from hexadecimal to decimal. This is the actual decimal value of the price that will appear in your catalog. This one is 200 simoleons. And then, catalog sorting. So if we look at catalog sorting, it duplicates the functions of the primary tab, but it also allows you to edit whether an object is allowed in community lots. So that is this value here. You can change it to community sort. Then let's collapse that down. Let's look at catalog ratings.
I have a question back on the community sort. Is it just one that allows that? If it's like 0, it's not. 1, it does?
Well, see, you have, I think, don't quote me on this, but if you change it to 128, that would be community lot only. If you have an object that you only want to appear in community lots. But
what about for both?
Would be just anything other than 0.
Okay, so I could put a 1 there and it was showing both. I asked that because I used to have a SimPE version where there was like this button at the top for object data, and it was like a very like clean window, and it was like, do you just want this to appear in community lot? And you could click it. I don't have that anymore, so when I have pose boxes that aren't available for community lot, I like to go in and change that. And I kind of struggle with that ever since I lost that ability in whatever SimPE version I used to have. So that's good for me to know.
Yeah, that's kind of handy. So we have, where is it? It's the last value here. It's community sort in section 3. So then, if we collapse 3 down, we'll look at catalog ratings. These are the little green pluses that appear in your catalog, like plus hunger or plus fun or whatever. Catalog ratings control the bonus flags that you see in the catalog. Okay? And then this one is cool. User placement. So this is it doesn't fix the placement that is done in behaves, and that's a topic for another day, but it changes the flags in your catalog. So you could change this to a 1, and in the flag it would say must be against wall. So user placement, okay, it adds the placement flags. And then mesh and graphics. Okay, so this coordinates tiles in multi-tile objects. So if you have, for example, this one, master tile, master ID is 4. So that's telling you this is a master tile, and then it doesn't have a sub-index because this is a tile that ties them all together. If you hop up here, master tile sub-index 0. This is the 0 position on of the table. If it were one tile to the left, it would be 256. If it were one tile up on the y-axis, it would be 1. I don't know, it's kind of fun to tinker with. I might do another workshop on that. If you have a multi-tile object, you need to know which one is the lead tile. That goes here. 3D object type, I don't recall exactly. I think it allows you to make an object usable with animations. I don't remember exactly. I will have to research that. Not terribly important for beginning creators. Resource cross-reference. Okay, this one is cool. So resource cross-reference, this tells you, okay, what's my slots ID? Slots ID, this coordinates with the slot resource. For example, if you have a table and you want to add slots to it, this tells you which slot resource this tile has access to. And then default graphic, I don't really use that. Well, what did I put in my notes? Resource cross-references allows you to link to other resources such as slot or T-tab. Okay, so the T-tab, that's the little pie menu. That is interaction table ID, this one. So this one, -1, it doesn't have access to a T-tab. But it's good information if you're creating like say pose boxes. This will be important to a pose box maker. The object data, in summary, does a lot of cool things, and it's handy, I misspelled that, for new creators to understand. It's not a part of the scene graph. Okay, so these are the resources outside of the scene graph that a new creator would need access to. Okay, so so if you're creating a new object, the first two things that you're going to do are create a new GID and add a catalog description. And you can do that with these two resources. So the GMDC. This is where it gets interesting. GMDC. This has its own plugin, a very unique plugin because of the type of resource that it is. GMDC, geometric data container, is part of the object that holds the mesh. What's a mesh? Have you ever seen a paper mache done over a wire skeleton or crepe paper glued over cardboard to make a piñata? The mesh is just this. It's a 3D armature that you're gluing your texture and your material over. Okay? The GMDC's plugin is unique. In the default, that's this tab here, the first sub-tab here, the C geometric data container. To the left, there are import, export, and preview buttons. These allow you to extract the current mesh as an OBJ, add or replace the current mesh, or see what the mesh looks like. So if we wanted to export it, we click on the export button, give it a cool name here, save, and it will export as an OBJ as is. If we want to import, we can look for another OBJ to import over this. If we just want to see how it looks, we click on that preview button, and yep, that is definitely a table. Okay, the middle portion of the default tab is taken up by the preview window for the model. That's this thing here. The right portion holds a joint hierarchy for jointed meshes. So say I have a cabinet or a bar stool or some other object that has an animation skeleton, the joints in that animation skeleton are going to appear over here. Or if I have a body mesh, the animation skeleton data is all going to appear here.
Would there be a time you ever mess with that? Like, is it for animation only, or like when would you edit that area? Thank you.
Well, you can't really edit it. I mean, if you loaded, say, a cabinet, well, let's do that. Let me instead of just explaining it, let me show you. Okay, this one will work fine because you can see, okay, we've got regular old counter. You got the countertop, you got the two swinging doors. And you can see that with this one, it's jointed. It actually has right door, it has left door, it has drawer transition. So what happens when we click on one of these? Okay, there are no vertexes assigned to this. Root trans, okay, now we can see the base of the cabinet is assigned to this joint. Then we got right door. So these are the vertexes assigned to the right door joint. Left door. And the drawer trans. Okay, so we've got a full sliding drawer here. Okay?
So it's just more of a way to view what's assigned, not actually mess with it in this
but then
area.
you could then if you don't like the way that it's assigned, you could go back to Milkshape and edit it. So it's you're checking what is assigned with this function. No,
okay.
That's not what I want to do. So let's hop back over here. I want this one because it has all kinds of resources in it. So the right portion holds a joint hierarchy for jointed meshes. So the next significant sub-tab is group. I say significant because I barely use this at all. And this. So we go over to groups. What does groups do? The group sub-tab allows you to change the names of existing subsets and groups, subsets or groups, or delete unused groups. So say I import something and I don't like the way that it's named, I can click on it and rename it here. Or I don't like wood for some reason, I can just delete wood using this link. Or have you ever come across an object where, how can I explain it? It's hard to grab with a little hand tool. Like you can only grab certain parts of the mesh.
Oh yeah.
That's because the bounding box is broken. And that's another cool feature of the GMDC. So if you look at the model tab, if you want to fix the bounding box right quick, you just hit clear. It erases all of this data, and then you would select each group in the list and click Add to Bounding Mesh. And then when you go to grab the object in game, it will be fixed. And I think that's it. The Model subtab can be used to fix the object's bounding box. That is, the part of the cursor that grabs in game. The part that the cursor grabs in game. As the visual representation of the object structure, the GMDC is an important part of the scene graph and a part that new object makers should be familiar with. It falls below the GMND on the hierarchy and has to be linked correctly in order for the crest to see it. So, what do I mean by that? For newer object makers, and I always hammer this point home, check your scene graph. If something is broken, check your scene graph. The scene graph is a visual representation of how the object is put together. And the GMDC is down here at the bottom. It talks to the GMND. And if your GMDC does not talk to the GMND, this line will be broken. The TXTR. The TXTR, texture image, is a 2D image that gets applied to your mesh. So, let's hop down to the TXTR. And this has a whole bunch, so we'll just look at one. So that is a wood TXTR there. The TXTR's plugin is fairly straightforward. The left 1/3 holds the TXTR's file name, the DXT format, and the levels of detail. The right 2/3 holds the actual image and has integration with DDS utilities. Okay, so we look over here. We've got the file name. We've got the DXT format, in this case DXT1, and we have all of the levels of detail. So the reason I like DDS utilities, if you build an image using DDS utilities, it will update all of these. Whereas if you just use the import feature, you would have to update them automatically. Or I'm sorry, you would have to update each one individually. And then we have all of these features. Okay, so TXTR, texture image. It is what it says on the tin. The TXTR is at the bottom of the scene graph hierarchy and communicates with the TXMT via the TXMT's standard material-based texture name property. If it isn't linked properly, the crest can't see it. The TXTR is one of the primary resources that new creators edit, so you should be familiar with it. Okay, so yes, new creator, this is probably one of the resources you want to be most familiar with. So let's have a look at the scene graph again. Okay, so this is a TXTR. This is the one we were looking at actually. This is the main TXTR. So where does the TXTR go? It gets tied to an individual TXMT. Okay, moving on. The TXMT material definition is each subset's each subset or group's material. The TXTR tells the crest what to apply. The TXMT tells how to apply it. The TXMT's job in an object is to say, be shiny or be glowy or be opaque. The TXMT has a plugin that looks similar to the GMND or crest. The default tab is content and the default subtab is properties, where all of the material's properties are listed in text form. You can also use this tab to add or remove properties. So let's have a look at that. Let's go to TXMT. once again in the resource list, and this is what the plugin for the TXMT looks like. Okay, so this texture name, this is a textual representation of the texture that we were just looking at. This is what links to TXMT and TXTR. And all of these different properties, they do like different things. If you had a look at the TXMT workshop, we covered some of those. So by default, this is the content tab. This is the main view of the TXMT, and by default it's on the properties tab. Okay? The C material definition subtab contains the material file name and informs what type of material to apply. So you hop over here, and there are a couple of choices like Sim Skin, Sim Standard Material, and Standard Material. There isn't a drop down to show you, but for example, if this were underwear in Body Shop, the type of material is probably going to be Sim Skin because it's just applied directly to the Sim Skin, and then the parts that aren't used get alphaed out. Okay? The file list subtab references files that the material should pull from, the TXTR, environment cube, and so on. So it's just, this is different resources. If it were like reflective, like high gloss, you would add a line here, and then just one of the default Maxis environment cubes, for example. We may do that one day. Maybe we will do a deeper dive in. Well, we've already done one deep dive into the TXMT, but I guess I could do one for like reflective materials. The categorize properties tab displays the material's properties, but this time in graphical form, making it simpler to understand and edit. So do you remember back when we did the TXMT workshop, we changed the outer and inner glows to a blue color, to Dodger blue, just to make it really pop in the game. So what I'm saying here is that in the properties tab, this is a textual representation, but here in categorize properties, this part it's more visual. You can actually see what you're applying to the material. So then within the scene graphs hierarchy, the TXMT falls between the TXTR and the SHPE. The shape sees the TXMT via the parts tab, and if this link is broken, the crest won't display the material. Okay, well, we will have a look at that when we get to the shape, but for now, let's have a look at that scene graph just so we can see where the TXMT fits into all of it. This is the TXMT. In this case, it ties the TXTR to the SHPE and to the MMAT. But we'll hop into that a little bit later. If the material isn't recolorable, it doesn't need to tie to the MMAP, but it should always, always, always tie to the SHPE. Okay, so TXMT down. Other important resources. The MMAP material override. This is the top tier resource on the scene graph hierarchy. It informs the crest which materials can be overridden, recolored, and references the TXMT and TXTR to apply. Well, it doesn't really touch the TXTR. The TXMT does that. It's linked to the object's GID, so the GID in the OBJD should match the GID that the MMAT references. cool to know when you're making recolors. So let's have a look at one of those. See, the MMAT, it's really straightforward. It looks almost like an XML resource. So here we have all of the properties of the MMAT. This is the subset name. This is the name of the subset that this applies to. So table wood. That's the name. This is the GID. So the GID that this MMAT references is, it ends in 05AB. We'll hop back over here, 05AB. So we know that the MMAT is configured correctly. This is the name of the material. This is the name of the TXMT. The model name, that's the name of the crest, and I believe that's it. Another cool thing about the MMAT that I didn't really mention in the document, if you click on this preview button, watch what happens. Okay, so we can see that this is a valid recolor because it looks as it should in the preview window. A lot of folks don't know that. Well, I did. I only found out about the preview window for MMATs a couple of years ago by chance, but it's a cool feature. So
I had a question. So the MMAT only shows when there's recolors, or is there any other time that shows up? Because I'm not that familiar with it. When I open things, they don't usually
okay,
have them, especially like hood deco,
so
because you can't
if
recolor them.
an object is recolorable, it's going to have one or two recolorable subsets. Those are named in the GMND, and I will dive into that in a bit. But once it's been named recolorable, you would need to set up an MMAT and reference the TXMT that is to be overridden. See what I'm saying?
So if an object doesn't have it, like you have to manually add an MMAT,
yes,
or okay.
yes. I mean, it has to have several things in order to be recolorable. So one, it has the recolorable subset has to be named in the GMND. Two,
Mm-hmm.
the MMAT has to correctly reference the CRES, the TXMT, and the subset name in the GMDC. And three, it has to have the correct GID assigned to it. And the preview window, it allows you to see that everything is linked correctly. So
Mm-hmm.
if, for example, if we were missing something, if that material wasn't being applied for some reason, you would see just a table with no texture in that preview window. Yes? No? Did that make sense?
Well, that makes sense. Thank you for explaining it.
Okay. So, moving on. The CRES. The CRES resource node is the object's nerve center. It contains slot coordinates, footprint information, object thumbnail information, and it assembles the scene graph into a cohesive unit. If you're just learning about object creation, I do not recommend messing with the CRES at all because it can break the object if you don't know what you're doing. So if you're an advanced creator, okay, now it's time to play with the CRES. Okay, now let's expand the footprint. Now let's add nodes so that we can add slots to them. But as a beginning creator, just don't mess with the CRES. Okay, the SHPE. This is just below the CRES on the hierarchy, and the SHPE, it ties into both the GMND and the TXMT. So you've got your shape, you've got your material and texture. The SHPE is the scene graph's party coordinator. It advises what materials to apply to what meshes. On the scene graph hierarchy, it's above the GMND and TXMT, but below the crest. The crest sees the shape's TGI values in its resource tab. That's not essential information for beginners. As long as nothing is broken, there's no need to fix it. But it's interesting that the crest sees the SHPE differently than the SHPE sees other resources. So the SHPE's plugin is kind of straightforward. By default, it's on the parts tab. And what the parts does, it identifies the name of the subset in the GMDC and what material should be applied to it. But if you look at the items tab, this is going to tell you what GMND it ties into. If it doesn't help to have the subset name correct in parts if you don't have the GMND properly linked to the SHPE. Did we cover? No, we did not cover GMND yet. Okay, so now GMND. The GMND geometric node identifies which subsets of the GMDC are recolorable, and in the case of slaved objects, it identifies the crest name of the master material. The crest sees the GMND via the Shapes Items tab. If this is not linked correctly, the GMDC can't be rendered correctly. Good to know, but not vital for new creators. Okay, so let's look. Okay, this looks similar to a crest or to sorry, lost my train of thought. And essentially the GMND and the crest look very similar. They both have the drop-down list structure. They have the same type of plugin. They're a little different, but for the most part, they're similar. So the default view of the GMND is the Content tab and the C Geometry Node subtab. But if we check the block list and we go to this one that says Design Mode Enabled, this is going to tell us which subsets are recolorable. So TS Design Mode Enable, we have this table wood. This is naming the subset in the GMDC that we want to recolor. Okay, and if this were a slaved object, this is the master for the set, by the way. Well, let's have a look at that. I have many objects that are slaved to this one. So I go to kitchen cabinet corner. There's a different block in the slaved objects. It's called TS materials mesh name. What this does, it names the crest of the master object. Okay, so it's saying so design mode enabled, the name of this subset is, the name of the subset that's recolorable is wood. Okay, where do we get that wood material from? We get that wood material from this crest that's named basic bar. Let's go back to the table. Okay, so if we look up here, this is the MMAT. The MMAT talks to the TXMT. This is the material that we're going to apply, and it talks to the crest. This is where we're going to apply it. The crest only talks to the SHPE. So this is the brains of the operation, and this coordinates the mesh data with the material data. It just puts them together. So our shape talks to the GMND and the TXMT. GMND talks to GMDC, and the TXMT talks to the TXTR. Oh, and one more thing. Remember when I was talking in the beginning of the presentation, I was talking about how in most cases the object data dictates the price for most build objects. This is not the case with fences. Fences are their own thing. I've actually had conversations, I don't remember if it was Kat or Looney who I was talking to about this. Okay, and I think that's it for today. Come at me with the questions.